Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of the Origins of Today podcast. I'm going to be your host, Elijah, and just to give you guys a little bit of a background on me, I've had this idea for a political, religious history podcast for a long time. I've just been too busy with my other podcasts. Clone Command, a Star Wars podcast. Go check it out on YouTube if you're into Star Wars. If not, totally get it. But I've been running that for about a little over a year now, and I decided it was time to start something else on top of it. So yeah, I've had these first few episodes kind of scripted out for a while, so I hope you guys enjoy them. Today's episode is going to be comparing the fall of the Roman Republic to the United States currently. So looking at similarities and trying to see if we can draw a conclusion from that. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this episode. And yeah, we're gonna get straight into the intro.
And some, I assume, are good people.
Further note that the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima.
You need to pray for the good Lord to protect America.
Won the race of discovery against the Germans.
Rome was the most powerful republic in history until it collapsed. Are we heading in the same direction? So before we get into this episode, I think it's important to kind of give a layout for the Roman Republic and how it worked. So the Roman Republic was considered one of the most powerful political and military institutions in the world, and it lasted for nearly 500 years. But as a result of infighting, political corruption, and political violence, it became a dictatorship ruled by an emperor. So now this may seem to be kind of irrelevant to the United States currently, but let's stop for a moment and consider the fact that historians draw a lot of similarities and comparisons between the United States and the Roman Republic, making us ask the question, will history repeat itself? So just to preface, I'm going to attempt to paint a picture of the Roman Republic's political structure. So Rome was a democracy, albeit a fragile one, and I want to make sure it's understood that Rome's democracy, although it was similar to our system, it was far more simplified than we have it. In theory, Roman citizens would have voted for senators who would then vote on legislation. But in reality, many rival factions began to use other means to get elected, including legal warfare against political opponents, using street gangs that caused riots and disrupted voting, and even using the military to take power. So obviously some of these sound very similar to stuff happening today, so we're going to take a look at it in this episode and really just see what similarities and connections we can draw from the Roman Republic to our current situation here in the United States. So one modern parallel that we can draw is through legal warfare. So as we discussed, Roman politicians prosecuted each other to censor and remove rivals. Nowadays, we see the modern political parties doing the same thing, with the left manipulating the political system to indict Trump. And although the Bidens were correctly accused of fraud, this could still be an example, as many voters said that they wouldn't have voted for Biden if the Biden laptop stuff had been leaked earlier. But either way, in the end, it's less about the actual justice and more about weakening an opponent, intentionally or not. I mean, that's always going to be the effect. Which leaves us with a question. If every leader gets prosecuted after leaving office, do we still have a democracy? And I feel like this is a big problem we're facing right now here in America, where we just had Joe Biden pardon his whole entire family upon leaving office. And is this going to set a precedent for political leaders? I don't know. We're going to have to see. But I think could be a major for our political system. Another parallel is political violence. In ancient Rome, we saw politicians hire huge mobs to rig votes. Sometimes these mobs even clashed in the streets. Today, we can see echoes of this with the BLM and Antifa riots that raged around the country after George Floyd. This parallel is still a little bit out there. America isn't too far gone for leaders to initiate violence from votes. But we are getting close, prompting the question, is political violence being normalized? And how could that possibly affect our voting and election cycles? In ancient Rome, the Senate was able to give emergency powers to crush threats. This power was abused, though, and ended up getting in the way of the rights of citizens. Similarly, we can look at times when leaders use emergency situations to get more power, including the Patriot Act after 9/11 and the COVID lockdowns. I believe this is where we are the closest to ancient Rome, when leaders use emergency powers to bypass democratic limits, is when we should begin to worry and wonder if the governments will give back their emergency powers. Now, that's not to say that there aren't times when emergency powers should be used or given, when you can't wait for Congress to pass a law or declare war or something like that. Yes, there are times, but make sure those emergency powers are given right back, and there should be more checks and balances to be sure of that, or stronger checks and balances, because the government can't just keep gaining more and more power simply by using the excuse of, oh, well, it's an emergency. Finally, one of the most important and powerful parallels to draw is the influence of the military on politics. In Rome, we see generals like Sulla and Caesar overthrow governments and eventually lead to the collapse of the Republic and the beginning of the empire. We also see generals like General Milley coming back and having increased political influence. More importantly, there's also the military-industrial complex, which feeds many political campaigns and wars, leaving us to wonder if the US and intelligence community is too powerful and how that is really affecting our government. I think this needs to be looked into a lot. I think this is a major problem, and this has a possibility to be one of the worst conclusions that we can draw from Rome to our current situation, as that is how Rome fell, is by the military taking over. And we can see that over and over again past republics, all throughout history. And I think it's a major problem, and it should be looked into and considered more seriously. After hearing all this, now we must consider what happened to Rome after all this political strife and division. Once the military took over, the Republic changed to an empire. Elections became meaningless, and instead power was decided by force and military strength, with the Senate still existing but having little authority. Now, the question of could this happen to us is an interesting one, because history doesn't always exactly repeat itself, but similar patterns are hard to ignore. Also, democracies don't collapse overnight, but they do slowly fade when factions become unwilling to share power. That's why understanding Rome can help us see possible warning signs for us now. So that's the end of the show, guys. I hope you enjoyed our first episode. Make sure to subscribe for more history-based politics. Have a great day, and God bless.